Would you say a freeze response is still part of a sympathetic nervous system response?
Yes, at the very earliest stages of engaging with a trauma, there is a sympathetic freeze response, and
Hmm.
then it goes to a sympathetic hyperarousal response, which is
Yeah.
typically your fight or flight, and
Yeah.
then it goes to the parasympathetic
When it
freeze response
collapses.
before it collapses. So
Right.
it's almost like you have an elevated sense of tension where you're sort of, for a moment, attempting to establish what's going on
Hmm.
just before your body kicks in. Do I attack or do I run?
Yeah.
And it's almost like priming, I would say, of the
Hmm.
system. And
Hmm.
then the sequence almost has an inevitability to it that
Hmm.
you don't control, because
Right.
it comes from, as you say, shutting down our digestive system, activating our
Yeah.
circulatory system
Hmm.
and our muscle system.
Hmm.
And this is what very few people understand. I remember hearing stories when the towers in New York collapsed that people were running until they totally ran out of steam, and they were maybe 10 miles away from the building before
Wow.
they stopped, and they were not conscious of what they were doing.
Right.
So
Right.
they totally dissociated, but their body was running. It almost reminds me of the headless chicken idea,
Hmm.
that your body is going to keep going even if it's disconnected at a thinking or a cortical level, because that what will, if you slow down to think about it for too long, you could be toast, as we say, or your life
Yes.
could be over.
Yeah.
So your inherent hardwired survival responses take over until
Hmm.
you're out of danger, and
Yeah.
it'll instinctively slow down then, either
Hmm.
when it's exhaustion or when it detects that the environment is safer
Yeah.
to 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 slow down.
Interesting how you mentioned that those like a fight flight response go together or possibly go together with a freeze or dissociation response, that thought doesn't function or there's not enough energy for thought to function in that very critical moment,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
the more
And
survival responses just take over.
yeah, and one of the very interesting things, and I've experienced it myself, is that time is a critical factor. Our nerves work really within milliseconds, so you can imagine how small a fraction of time that is,
Mm,
where it takes up to half a second, 500 milliseconds, for that bunch of nerves to coalesce in our brain as a formulation of a thought process. So that length of time could be critical to your survival. And
right,
that's the biological reason why the
mm,
body takes over
right,
before the mind has a chance to
right.
evaluate the situation.
The thing is, though, that often what comes afterwards is again judgment comes in as to why did I respond that way? Why
Mm.
did I freeze? Why didn't I fight? Or why did I fight too much? Or why did I
Exactly.
escape from that
Yeah.
situation? And
Mhm.
then like with animals, there might be a healthy response that runs to completion, and then that's it. There's no further engagement with thought with it. With human beings, it seems to be a bit more complex, is that we start to renumerate,
Yeah.
think
And
about it much
I,
after.
I think there's a very good example of that here in Manchester. On the 22nd of May, there were 22 people killed by a suicide bomber at a
Mm,
children's concert venue. And it's now 6 months since the attack. And a
yeah,
significant number of victims are so in that ruminative stage that they don't believe it's safe to leave home.
yeah,
So they aren't accessing any treatment. And the
mm,
only treatment sort of offered to them is telephone support, which isn't sufficient. So
yeah,
it needs people going in, working with them, and as you say, bringing them to completion. And there's
mm,
an interesting analogy, and I haven't studied it a lot, but Peter Levine in somatic experiencing looked at the animal world, and
mm,
they do a lot of shaking and movement
mm,
uh, after trauma, let's say, and he has applied that movement to
right,
his clients that he sees as a way of helping them to initiate the recovery process.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah, there's even somebody developed a specific therapy approach to that. It's called TRE, trauma release exercises, which I think is great for. They teach it as doing it on your own, which is great to some extent, I would say. Though it's severe trauma, it's probably limited.
Yeah, I
So
think that you do need what I'm very interested in now is the observer. So what comes in the therapeutic encounter between client and therapist allows that observer role, that you can witness what the client is doing and feed it back to them in a way that they wouldn't notice necessarily themselves.
Right.
So there could be a key somatic intervention or observation that you make that makes the link between what happened at the time and what will get them to be able to move forward,
right,
and integrate that experience.
Thinking or talking about time frames, it's interesting to see that how time gets mixed up in when we still suffer from post-trauma symptoms. Say, for example, those people in Manchester that still live somewhat in the past and re-experience their symptoms on a day-to-day basis, that fear of going out or the fear of impending danger while the event has already passed.
And why do you think that is so powerful an inhibitor to progress for them?
Because I think there's not that differentiation between what's happening then, there, and now. I often
and I would totally agree with you that there's this concept of time, but really all time is unitary time, and we can bring past, present, and future into the session.
Yeah.
And it gives us great flexibility in helping them relive and re-experience and reprocess the event in a safe environment where they are brought through it.
Exactly. This is a structured way of working with it in an organized way. And it's good to understand that to start with, that emotion, I often say that emotion doesn't live linearly, it lives spatially. And that means that, negatively speaking, when you suffer from post-traumatic stress symptoms, they kind of keep repeating themselves in the present, projecting themselves on situations and people, and even creating reenactment. But in a therapy process, you can actually use that to the benefit of the therapy process, that, as you said, you can tune into past through the feelings that are present as symptoms in the present moment. You can link back to the past and help to bring that to a resolution.